One generation ago, my father was a poor Hungarian immigrant who escaped persecution. His grandparents were Holocaust survivors. They then immigrate to Debrecen in Hungary. Then the Hungarian Revolution happens in the early to mid 50s. Gets really bad again for Jews. And then in the middle of the night, they escape Hungary and find their way to a boat and spend weeks traveling on this terrible vessel to Canada, who lets in 40,000 Hungarian refugees. My father was that person. Gets here, my grandfather doesn't have any money, doesn't speak the language, has no education, and my grandfather opens a little egg stall called Le Capitaine at the Jean Talon Farmers Market here in Montreal.
Okay.
And he works 7 days a week his entire life. The fact that a generation later, his grandson, or my father's son, was able to build, a company worth well over $100 billion makes me really proud. And my grandfather's not around anymore to see this, my paternal, but my maternal grandfather, who was born here, who was a peddler his whole life, is around in my life. I'm very, very close to them, and he sees my success, and I see it in his eyes, just the way that he thinks about our family's journey. That he started with nothing. He sold schmutzes in the back of his car, and it changes the dynamics of what it means to be successful. It means it's not just about you. It's about long-term legacy. It's about positioning the family in a way that my grandparents could never even imagine. My wife and I recently moved from Ottawa, Canada, where we started Shopify, to Montreal, which is our favorite city in the whole world. We moved here about 2 years ago. And our parting gift to Ottawa was we built the Finkelstein Jewish Center. And we had the opening in October 2025. We had the ribbon cutting ceremony at the Finkelstein Jewish Center. My parents were there. My family was there. The Prime Minister of Canada was there. The mayor of the city was there. It was a very special moment. And I got on stage, and I've been thinking about this speech for years. What am I going to say when it's finally time to open this? And I asked everyone to look at the building, and I said, this building is not a symbol of success. It's not a symbol of hard work. It's not a symbol of entrepreneurial, strategy. This building is a symbol of survival. That's perseverance. This building is what is the Jewish story, is that, 2 generations ago, my grandfather was sitting in a concentration camp, and now I'm putting up buildings with our family's name on it.
My name is David M. Cohen, and this is the J100 podcast, brought to you by the Allgemeiner. There are entrepreneurs who build companies, and there are entrepreneurs who become almost inseparable from the idea of building itself. Harley Finkelstein is the president of Shopify, one of the most consequential commerce platforms in the world. But his story begins far from corporate boardrooms. As a college student, he built a t-shirt business to help his mother pay rent and put his sisters through Jewish school. Today, his understanding of success is still rooted in family, survival, and the responsibilities one generation inherits from another. He is also the creator and co-host of Big Shot, a project preserving the stories of Jewish entrepreneurs who overcame displacement, poverty, prejudice, and extraordinary odds to build institutions that transformed entire industries. The project describes itself as both an archive and a celebration of Jewish entrepreneurship. In this conversation, Harley explains why he believes Jewish mothers may be one of the Jewish people's greatest competitive advantages, why aspiring builders should be careful whose advice they take, and how his grandparents' experiences shaped his desire to create security across generations. We also discuss his relationship with Israel, how October 7th changed his understanding of Jewish vulnerability, and why anti-Semitic attempts to disrupt his public Jewish life have only made him more determined to celebrate Jewish achievement. And we look toward the future, the collapse of traditional gatekeepers, the rise of artificial intelligence, and what Harley believes may become the golden age of entrepreneurship. Harley Finkelstein, president of Shopify, and a 2026 J100 honoree, joins us now. Harley, it's great to meet you and to have you on the program. Thank you for being here.
It is a great pleasure to be here, David. Thank you for having me. You should know that I found out that I was a J100 nominee this year through my mother, through
Oh,
her
wow.
Facebook Jewish Moms of Montreal group. Someone posted it and said, and so she called to tell me that, which is always really nice when she finds out about things before I do, especially for a nomination as that makes her as proud as this. So thank you.
If I give a Jewish mother, nachas, a sense of spiritual fulfillment, I'm very
I mean, look,
grateful.
I will tell you something that I haven't really shared with anyone, but I deeply believe to be true. When you look at the fact that Jews are about 15 million on the planet, but we are disproportionately successful across almost every vertical of life, of business, of professionals, maybe other than sports. We own the teams, but we're not really great athletes in that way. I know the Maccabee games try to prove that wrong, but in truth, we're good at most things. I actually think one of the reasons that we've done so well is people talk about the grit and the hard work and the work ethic and the multi-generational trauma and all that stuff. I actually think it's much more simple than that. I think one of the reasons that we have been so successful is because we have this super ingredient in us and in our lives known as Jewish mothers. And I think Jewish mothers have given their children chutzpah, audacity, confidence, swagger, and just incredible abilities because so many of us have these amazing Jewish mothers in our lives who have told us from a very young age that we can do whatever we want. And at some point, I hope someone writes a book about the unfair advantage that Jews have by having Jewish mothers, because I think it is underestimated and undertold.
That's a great opener because I think Mother's Day is not too far off in the distant future. So I think it's in May. So that's a great opening. I'm gonna, I don't usually start like this, but I saw a tweet on X yesterday, Harley, from you, pretty active in the space. And you said like this, you said, stop taking advice from people who have never built anything. They haven't put something on the line. Their opinion on your risk isn't worth hearing. The people who judge the attempt are never the ones making one. Now, this was, I think, said in a context of this wasn't just like in a vacuum, but I'd love for you shed a little light, if you may, on this comment.
I mean, my favorite speech in the world is the Teddy Roosevelt speech, "The man in the arena." It is not the critic who counts, but the man in the arena or the person in the arena that counts. I think for any leader, whether you're leading in the context of an entrepreneurial venture like a company, or you're leading in the context of an organization, or across any vector, there is no shortage of people that tell you all the things you're doing wrong. And I think having a growth mindset and feeling like you can always do better and learn more is incredibly important. But I do also believe that there are many people out there that are getting whiplash from people's opinions. And I think, you started the conversation today in the introduction by saying that I'm a super mentor and a proud Jew. Um, every Friday for the last 4 years or so, my wife and I, Lindsay and I, and our daughters Bailey and Zoe, put out a message to the world across social media saying, "We hope you had a great week. We hope you have a great weekend. Shabbat shalom." When I first started doing that 4 years ago, I got countless messages from friends, family, and anyone who seemingly cared about my family or purported to care, saying, "Terrible idea. You are putting a Jewish star on your arm and you are identifying yourselves as a Jew. Do not do this. Please stop doing this." And 4 years later, I have all of those people that told me not to do it tell me how great it is that I do it. My point is that I think you have to take advice. You have to value others' opinions. You have to be ready to change course if someone has an idea for you that can help you and add value. But I think you have to be very careful where that comes from, because ultimately what people are doing is they're exporting their own values to you, but they're also exporting their own BS, their own baggage to you as well. And especially in the entrepreneurial realm, people are very quick to provide opinions and advice. And I think you have to actually ask yourself, is this someone who I should be taking advice from? Is this someone who has the requisite experience where their advice is actually objective and valuable. Many years ago, we talked earlier on about how you're an ex-lawyer and so am I. I never planned to practice law. I'm not sure you did, but I thought law school was incredible. I'm glad I went there. But as part of after you finish law school in Canada, you do 10 months of what's called articling get called to the bar, and you work for a big law firm and you train under them before you get called. And I knew I was never going to practice long term, but in the articles in that program, I was working for a mid-sized firm in Toronto, and I remember someone asking me, "Hey, how do you know you don't want to practice?" And I said, "Well, I never. That was never the point. I always want to be an entrepreneur." And I said, "But also, when I look up at the top of the firm and I look at who's leading the firm, I ask myself, is that someone I want to be or someone's life that I want to have in 10, 20, 30 years?" And the answer is unequivocally no. They are on the wrong side of the table. They are not building. They're consulting. They're guiding. They're playing the role of
Yeah,
coach.
they're external. They're not internal.
That's right. They're not in the arena, and I
Right.
need to be in the arena.
Exactly.
So that's what it meant. And that tweet that you referenced, or that X post, went viral yesterday. And I think because a lot of people, it resonated with a lot of people, that they also believe that they often get caught up in people's advice who should not be giving them advice.
Okay, thank you for that. Why did you go to law school, by the way? I know it was a great experience. I know you loved it, but why did you know it was going to be? Why did you do that?
I was at McGill in my undergrad. I finished high school early. I finished high school in Boca Raton at 17 years old. Went to McGill for undergrad because it was cheap. My parents did not have a lot of money, and so because I was born in Canada, McGill offered me a very in-state tuition, and it was very inexpensive and a great value. So I went there, and I had to start supporting my family. Built a t-shirt business when I was in college, and the t-shirt business did well for a 20-year-old kid. It was well in the grand scheme of things, probably did do as well as I relative to now. But at the time, it was I helped my mom with rent. I helped put my sisters through Jewish private school.
Oh, wow.
My dad was not around, and a mentor of mine pulled me aside at some point and said, "This t-shirt business you have is basically a cute business, but it's not going to go anywhere. And actually, you have far more potential than, doing this. You should go to law school, not to become a lawyer. You should go to law school because law school will be like finishing school for an entrepreneur. You will learn how to write, how to think, how to articulate, how to negotiate. You will learn life skills. You will learn how to read 4,000 pages and pick out the one line, the ratio desidendi in Latin, the one line that matters. And for me, law school was finishing school for entrepreneurship. I did a joint JD MBA, so I also went to business school. And I think if I had to do it all over again, I would do the law degree again. I probably would not go to business school unless it was like at Harvard or Wharton, where the network itself is actually more valuable than the curriculum.
Interesting. Fascinating. I used to ask this question on a former podcast that I hosted, but I'm going to ask you this because we're talking about it anyway. Can I ask you for one piece of advice that stands out in your mind that was really excellent, and one piece of advice that stands out that was atrocious, that was given to you?
I heard many years ago that I think it was Gates. I think it was Bill Gates who said it, but it was in a conversation with Gates that went something like, whatever you did between the age of 13 and 16 for fun and for free, if you can make a career out of it, you're probably going to find your life's work. Between the ages of 13 and 16, I was in high school. I was in a public high school called Spanish River High School community high school in South Florida. I was starting companies. I had a DJ business. I was always flipping things. I was selling T-shirts and all types of little hustles. I was an entrepreneur.
Sports cards?
Sports cards were part of it. The real money in high school was made on DJing bar mitzvahs, actually, for wealthy people.
You look like a DJ. I got the vibe. Okay.
Oh, thank you. I think it was DJing bar mitzvahs for wealthy people in Boca Raton. But so that's what I was doing. And so I heard that very early on in my life, and I thought a lot about that I think the path to finding your life's work is to find something that, there's literally a concept called ikigai. It's a Japanese concept, which is the Venn diagram overlap of what do you love, what is someone going to pay you for, and what's the world going to value. And when you can find that thing in the middle, that is likely going to be your life's work. Not only will that be a lot of fun and will that be an incredible journey for you of learning and growth, but also you could potentially, satisfy all your ambitions. And certainly for me, given my family's background, making money was very, very important to me. Having financial security and and creating multi-generational wealth for my children, my grandchildren was important. I didn't have that. I wanted that. So this is the best advice I think I ever got, although it wasn't direct. The worst advice I ever got actually was less sort of, it's less obvious, but it's a little bit of like, you become the 5 people you surround yourself with. And the reason I think that's really bad advice is because I think, my friend John Hope Bryant, famous entrepreneur out of Atlanta, says that if you hang around with 9 broke people, you'll be the 10th. And if you hang around 9 successful people, you'll be the 10th successful person. I believe that. I do believe that, your community, the people you spend your time with do help you achieve certain things. But I do think, though, that it also, the corollary to that and the double-edged sword to that, or double-edged knife to that, is you end up spending your time with the same people over and over again. And the story of my career and the story of Shopify is the story of Harley, of me and Toby, who is the original founder of Shopify. And we would never have been friends in high school. We would never have, I was class president, and I was on the varsity wrestling team, and I was an entrepreneur, and he was coding, and he didn't go to college. So actually I think that advice, that surround yourself with people that, you become the 5 people you surround yourself with, is good advice generally, except it misses the second line, which is, and also get outside your comfort zone to bring in people into that circle of 5 that you historically would never have spent your time with. I think they help you grow into new areas, and I think they help you grow as a human.
Interesting. There's a phraseology I've heard in the context of marriage, that opposites attract or opposites get divorced. That actually,
Same thing.
yeah, no,
That's right.
exactly what you're talking about, in the sense that we need both. Obviously, we need to surround ourselves with power people that share our vision, share our values, that are quality people. At the same time, if we're only limited to that scope, we're going to be depriving ourselves of tremendous potential for partnership and growth and stretching, which is what we
Well,
want.
we talked a bit about the superpower, the hidden superpower of the Jewish mother in many of our lives. I think as a entrepreneur myself, and as a husband, I think an example of that is, for me at least, the power, the superpower of an incredible, in my case, Jewish wife. Lindsay and I are very different, but we're both incredibly alpha. We are both incredibly type A. Our family motto that we have, and you can ask my 7-year-old, she's been reciting this since she was 3 or 4. Our family motto is, how you do anything is how you do everything. And it's a proxy for intentionality.
You know Jesse Itzler? Because
Very well. Jesse's
Jesse's
a
all
friend.
the time. Jesse's like an early mentor of mine, and I know that's a big line of his also.
Jesse is amazing. I did 2 Everest challenges, hiking Everest.
Oh, you did? Okay.
As part of this program in Montreal, along with him 2 years in a row. And of course, Jesse's married to Sarah, who's also an incredible alpha
Right.
type. But I believe in that this idea of intentionality, how you do things in one area of your life often gets replicated in other areas. And so the same way that, I run my business, Lindsay runs our family foundation. And the way that I think about a dinner party or Shabbat dinner on Friday night, Lindsay thinks about, how our vacation plans, our upcoming vacation plans. There is this wonderful thing about life that makes it a lot more colorful and a lot more interesting when you put the same amount of effort into everything. The key, though, to all of it is you cannot be everything to everyone. So I don't watch sports ever. I never watch sports at all. I'm sure it's fun. I know people love sports, but for me, it's like my family and my friends, and then it's Shopify, and then when I have any spare time, it's Big Shot, which maybe we should get to, which is my archival project. And so there are 3 things in my life: my family and friends, my business, and my hobby. And there's one hobby. I don't have 12 hobbies. I don't have 3 podcasts. I have one thing, and I've tried to blend them in a way that allows me for the highest amount of performance across all 3. And I'm not succeeding in all of them. I last night, laying in bed, I said to Lindsay, I want to be a great father. I have no way to know if I am. I guess I'll find out in 20 years if I've screwed up my kids or not. But there's these things that you want to be good at. And the nice part about running a public company is you get this immediate
feedback and your stock price.
Feedback loop, right? You ping the tower on a decision, and the tower pings you back by virtue of stock price. Now, in the short run, it doesn't matter, but in the long run, the stock market does reflect the proper valuation of a company and the value that is being created. I don't have that with parenting. Something that I said to my daughter yesterday, she won this like amazing poetry reading competition. Now she's presenting at the higher level, and I told her to be a lot more animated. And my wife said, "No, like don't be more animated. In fact, that's the feedback we got is you're using your hands too much." But I use my hands a lot. And I said to my wife in bed, I was like, "I think I may have just screwed her up. Like I'm now I'm now pushing my bad habits of being animated and speaking with my hands in a very visual manner to my daughter. Maybe she's a better orator than I'm ever going to be."
Right. No, really fascinating. So many different things I'd like to pick up on. Let's talk a little bit about your origin story. You've referenced it a few times, your mom, etc. Your dad was not around, it sounds like. You mentioned though that it defined kind of your desire to be more financially secure. I'm curious, you said also driven to create multi-generational wealth. I'm curious, often when I talk to financially successful people, there's a friction between their own success and how they we're talking about raising children too. So I think it's actually a very apropos question in terms of, uh, do we want to quote unquote spoil our kids, or do we want to give them, we want to give them an easier path on some level? Yes. But I'm curious, the comment you made about wanting to create multi-generational wealth, what was that? What's that about specifically?
Well, that's specifically about the fact that when I look at the people that I admire most, which I mean, whether they're the people that I interview for Big Shot or they're just mentors of my life, for the most part, they're entrepreneurs because I'm at my core, first and foremost, I'm an entrepreneur. And the entrepreneurs that I admire, they didn't just change their lives, they've changed generational like lives. They've changed their children's lives, their grandchildren's lives, and if they're really lucky and really smart and thoughtful about it, their great grandchildren's lives. And I think as an entrepreneur, that is something wonderful um, to want to achieve, not necessarily to achieve, but to want to achieve. I think that forces you as an entrepreneur and a founder to think very long term, to think in like not in, quarters or even years, but truly in like decades. And so that's part of it. The other part of it is that 2 generations or 1 generation ago, my father was a poor Hungarian immigrant who escaped persecution. His grandparents were Holocaust survivors. They then immigrate to Debrecen in Hungary. Then the Hungarian Revolution happens in the early to mid 50s. Gets really bad again for Jews. And then in the middle of the night, they escape Hungary and find their way to a boat and spend weeks traveling on this terrible vessel to Canada, who lets in 40,000 Hungarian refugees. My father was that person. Gets here. My grandfather doesn't have any money, doesn't speak the language, has no education. And my grandfather opens a little egg stall called Le Capitaine at the Jean Talon Farmers Market here in Montreal.
Okay.
And he works 7 days a week his entire life. The fact that a generation later, his grandson or my father's son was able to build, a company worth well over $100 billion makes me really proud. And my grandfather's not around anymore to see this, my paternal, but my maternal grandfather, who was born here, who was a peddler his whole life, is around in my life. I'm very, very close to them, and he sees my success, and I see it in his eyes, just the way that he thinks about our family's journey. That he started with nothing. He sold schmutzes in the back of his car. I posted some videos about this because I actually interviewed him for Big Shot as a sort of a private episode, which I've not released. But I wanted to record his story, my grandmother's story, before they passed. They're in their early 90s, and it changes the dynamics of what it means to be successful. It means it's not just about you. It's about long-term legacy. It's about positioning the family in a way that my grandparents could never even imagine. I mean, I'll tell you a quick anecdote. When we left Ottawa, my wife and I recently moved from Ottawa, Canada, where we started Shopify, to Montreal, which is our favorite city in the whole world. We moved here about 2 years ago. And our parting gift to Ottawa was we built the Finkelstein Jewish Center. we met a Chabad rabbi when we were in law school, Rabbi Chaim Boyarsky, an amazing man. In fact, Lindsay and I met each other through a Jewish student event there, and he never had a building, so he was hosting this out of his house, like a lot of great Chabad rabbis do, Chabad on campus. And I made as a sort of throwaway comment in 2007. I said to him, so almost 20 years ago, I said to him, if I ever have any money, I'd love to build you a proper synagogue, a proper Jewish center. And in 2018 or so, I called him and said, I have some money. I want to start building this. And it's taken 5 or 6 years for us we found the property, we built it. It was too small. We built it again, made it even bigger. And we had the opening in October 2025. We had the ribbon cutting ceremony at the Finkelstein Jewish Center. My parents were there. My family was there. The Prime Minister of Canada was there. The mayor of the city was there. It was a very special moment. And I got on stage, and I've been thinking about this speech for years. What am I going to say when it's finally time to open this? And I asked everyone to look at the building, and I said, this building is not a symbol of success. It's not a symbol of hard work. It's not a symbol of entrepreneurial, strategy. This building is a symbol of survival. That
perseverance.
This building is what is the Jewish story, is that, 2 generations ago, my grandfather was sitting in a concentration camp, and now I'm putting up buildings with our family's name on it.
Right.
Interesting enough, at that moment, protesters started chanting, pro-Palestinian protesters started chanting horrible things at me. And luckily, I had a microphone, and I turned up the volume on the microphone. Again, you have to understand, there's tons of media there. The Prime Minister is there. There's police and our version of Secret Service is there. And my family, my daughters, my wife are on stage with me. And I just turn up the volume, and I keep saying my speech. So that's the reason why this sort of multi-generational thing matters to me. The other, but back to, your other part of your question, which was this idea of giving your kids a lot or not giving them enough, keeping them hungry. I've talked to mentors a bunch because I have wonderful mentors in my life, but I have 2 mentors on polar opposite sides of the spectrum on this exact topic. I have one mentor who is non-dynastic, really incredible entrepreneur, sold his business for, I won't say his name, but sold his business for $10 billion. And he is non-dynastic. He's just decided that his kids they can come to him and they can pitch him on ideas, but he's not giving his money away. And then I have another mentor who says, that's ridiculous. My kids should not have to. I won the lottery effectively, and why am I going to make my kids go through what I did? I didn't want it, I did it. So there are 2 schools of thought in terms of, once you've had some success, how do you raise incredibly entrepreneurial, hardworking children? And my kids are still young. I haven't figured out, Lindsay and I have not figured out what we want to do exactly with our kids from that perspective. But my kids see me working. I mean, I work 50, 60 hours a week.
You're not chilling and sitting on your
I'm not chilling. There's no, we're not sitting on the couch. My wife is a psychotherapist. She's also an entrepreneur. She's about to start her second company. She's an ice cream company. Now she's starting a high-end gift basket company. What they see, what they are experiencing growing up in our household is, incredibly hardworking, passionate people who are always talking about the next thing and building and community and hard work and grit. And they're growing up in a beautiful home, much bigger than I grew up in. And we have staff and we have people helping us in our home. So I'm not going to say we shouldn't have these things, but there's deep respect, there's deep gratitude. I explain to my kids all the time how we got here, why we have the things we do. And I think ultimately my version of it is probably not on either extreme. It's somewhere in the middle, where I want my kids to find their own version of life's work and be independent. But I think the idea of creating multi-generational safety nets matters a lot to me. And you've heard this too, but it's discussed why did modern Jews have so much anxiety, and often you hear about, well, it's because we're the ones that survived. and the paranoid survived, the concentration camps. And so what you're left with are not the Jews that were killed. It's the ones that were incredibly anxious and paranoid. And so
Right.
that doesn't go away. It's in our DNA.
Right. No, excellent. Really excellent. Thank you for all of that context. Really beautifully articulated. Very inspiring, frankly. So thank you, Harley, for that. Thank you so much. Let's jump in. I'm all over the place, but let's jump into the Big Shot podcast, because I know that's one of your three big buckets, in essence, as you described. And would love to hear the origin story of that. What motivates it? And you have fascinating hosts. I've listened to some of your episodes. I'd love to hear, like, kind of nuts to bolts, how you approach
Yeah.
the podcast.
So the podcast was, so my one of my best friends is David Siegel. David is famously the founder of David's Tea. I did not know David growing up. David and I both met in 2015, the year that I was taking Shopify public on the New York Stock Exchange, and he was taking David's Tea public on the NASDAQ.
Okay.
And someone connected us and said, like, you guys don't know each other. You guys are both Jewish entrepreneurs. You
Whose
both
IPO was more? Whose IPO was more successful?
I think it was mine,
Great.
by a long shot. He would
Right.
admit that too. He's done very, very well. He left the company shortly thereafter. But I think we both actually. I think at the IPO time, I think our IPO, we had a $1 billion market cap. I think he had an $800 million market cap. So it's pretty close. Unfortunately, David left, and that company is, has gone the other way. Well, Shopify has grown 100x since then. But we met, and the centerpiece of our friendship and relationship has always been this incredible curiosity about Jewish entrepreneurship, and specifically the greats, the people that came before us. We've been talking about the Rothschilds since we met, and their story. We've read every book possible. We talk about the Bronfman family all the time. We talk about these like iconic people, and that's just how we talk. Like, just we hear these stories, read a book, and we're always sort of kibitzing about these people.
Have you done
And
any episodes on the Reichman family?
no, we've not done the Reichman family, but we talk about the Reichman all the time. In fact, the Reichman family, one of our favorite stories is the Shabbos elevator, where not only they put because they had built first Canadian place, the tallest building in Canada, but they had a Shabbos elevator, but everyone else in the building who was not Jewish had to ride the Shabbos elevator up and down all Saturday, every Saturday for Shabbat. So
that's how you win. That's how you win friends and influence people. Yeah,
it's an incredible thing, and they're an amazing family. So that's sort of our, like, I don't know. That's what we talk about when we hang out. We're not sports guys. We talk about Jewish entrepreneurs. So about a year, so around 2022 or so, we vacationed together. We're sitting on the beach in Turks and Caicos, and we're talking about all this stuff too. And it dawned on us that some of these people, some of these Jewish entrepreneurial legends, are in their like 80s and 90s and hundreds. And unlike, Jesse Itzler or Harley Finkelstein, they're not on the podcast circuit. Their stories have not been captured because, frankly, podcasts didn't exist, until very recently. And maybe they wrote a book, but even their books, like, it hasn't been updated. So we thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool just for ourselves, for no one else, if we began to archive the stories of the greatest Jewish entrepreneurs of the last half century? And we're like, yeah, let's do it. So we ended up, I called a couple of people that I thought would be great. Again, this is the Big Shot podcast started just for David and I, just as a personal interest project. And so I called Charles Bronfman first, because, Sam Bronfman is probably, on a North American scale, I think the godfather of Jewish entrepreneurship. He built Seagram. So more importantly, he created what is now, I think, the community of successful Jewish entrepreneurs. So we called him first. And then second, I'd met many years ago Aldo Ben Sadoun, who was a very poor Moroccan immigrant who came to Canada and built Aldo shoes, became a billionaire. Amazing story. And then Jonathan Weiner, who created Canderel. So 3 Montreal-based Canadian entrepreneurs who I knew really well. And I called them and said, can I record your story? And Dave and I go to see them at their, I think we did one at Shopify, and the rest we did in their homes. And we literally just got whatever camera crew we knew, and we said, hey, let's just start filming. Called it Big Shot and recorded these 3 episodes. And we put on YouTube, just put on YouTube and kind of left it there. And it was remarkable. Immediately we started to get so many people calling us and asking us about, about these stories and explaining to us like how much the stories affected them, and how, everyone sort of had a different version of, of having met someone. And it was just the most incredible thing. So from there, we decided, okay, there's a real there. There is a real opportunity for us to continue telling these stories. And then we went to Toronto and we interviewed Izzy Sharp, who created the Four Seasons. And we interviewed, who was it? Eddie Sunshine, who created the REIT. And and it just started getting bigger and bigger. And so we've now done about 30 episodes or so. The archive is stacked. We did Joe Schaefer's 104 years old. We just did Jeffrey Katzenberg, Lloyd Blankfein. We've done Michael Ovitz, Stephen Ross. We did Don Sofer, who created Aventura, who literally built Aventura. And he unfortunately, he passed like 2 weeks or 3 weeks later. So it's sort of his final, his final interview. Bobby Kotick, Mike Milken, Linda Resnick created Fiji Water and pomegranate juice. Mickey Drexler, retail royalty. Bobby Brown, Ron Shake, Leo Cooperman, Larry Silverstein. I mean, you'll know from New York, literally built New York City. These incredible people, and it's just been this incredible labor of love for us. And now Big Shot is in the top 5% of all podcasts. I think it's the only Jewish related podcast, maybe other than Call Me Back. But I think it's the only Jewish related podcast in the top 5% of podcasts.
Yeah.
And so we had Katzenberg last week. Next week we have Barry Diller coming out.
Oh, cool.
And
it started as live interviews, and now it's virtual. Everything's live.
Everything's live. We fly it to go meet these people in person in their house.
That's why you don't have a gazillion podcasts. I mean,
that's right. No. We go and fly. We fly to their homes and meet them, and it's kind of amazing, right? Sitting in Linda Resnick's house. I mean, Linda Resnick, just as an example.
I didn't realize that at all. Wow, that's incredible.
Fiji water. Pomegranate juice. 75% of every pistachio sold in the world, she owns. She, years ago, she owned Franklin Mint. Created that really beautiful high-end mahogany Monopoly board. I mean, these are, and again, across the board, other than maybe one or two, these were all poor people, and they built industries. I mean, Izzy Sharp started with a motel in Toronto and built the Four Seasons hotel chain, and the stories they tell are incredible. And because they're above the age of, 80 years old, or Joe Schaefer 100 years old, they don't hold back. They tell everything. There's no more ego. They're candid and transparent. And it's a celebration of Jewish survival. It's a demonstration of Jewish success, but also it's a bit of a Trojan horse. And I don't often share this, but I'll share this. It's a Trojan horse because a lot of non-Jews also listen and watch these shows. And what Big Shot does is, and we've heard this now hundreds of times from non-Jews who don't know these stories, who are not part of the Jewish community. And they say, we always assumed that all these people were born into it, that all these people were born on third base or second base. We had no idea that, Eddie Sunshine, who created RioCan, who created the modern day REIT, he was born in Bergen-Belsen. He was born in a displaced persons camp. For him to go and become one of the wealthiest people in North America, how does that happen? Well, we explain how it happens. And there's some really cool lessons about family and hard work. And, everyone talks about their spouse. And we ask this really interesting question, David. We always say at the end, okay, when did you know that you made it? And all of them to a T, other than one, which I won't say who, but you can go check if you want, all of them have said, we have not made it yet.
Okay.
And it's just this amazing thing to hear. Some of these people are worth tens of billions of dollars, and they still don't think they have enough and haven't made enough and haven't done enough.
It's all because it's it's the process more than it's the end.
That's right. It's the journey. But actually, that also makes me feel, this is where it's a very personal thing, that makes me feel seen, because I still don't feel like I have enough. Am I doing enough? I've built enough. I'm still grinding every day. But it's a beautiful project because it's the story of survival, just like me putting up that building.
Sounds like you're fighting anti-Semitism, and you're making what we would call in Hebrew parlance like a great Kiddush Hashem, a great sanctification of God's name, because inadvertently you're in essence fighting anti-Semitism because you're educating non-Jews, or maybe even Jews who have a negative perspective of Jewish wealth, that it came primarily through incredible hard work and diligence and sacrifice, which is incredibly
And that's
valuable.
the best part, that I get these messages all the time saying, I watched the interview with Leo Cooperman, or I watched the interview with Michael Milken, both billionaires, both incredible, finance geniuses. And Milken famously is the bond king. And I'll get these notes from someone and they'll say, I'm not Jewish, I'm not an entrepreneur, but I watched the Milken episode. I had no idea how hard it was to get to where he is. And it creates understanding for us. No longer does the people, this narrative that we're 15 million people in the world out of 8 billion, and yet we're disproportionately successful. Like we must have, we own the banks, or we're bad for doing this, or we've had it creates understanding around the world that this is not like, we did not have a head start. In fact, just the opposite, that
Right.
constantly throughout history, people have wanted to hurt us and push us down, and we've survived and persevered. So actually, it's interesting because more and more as I get older, I actually think Big Shot will be the thing that will ultimately be my potential legacy. Not Shopify, not my business success, but this Sunday project that I have, and it's all funded by me and David and by
It's
fans.
it's done on Sundays. Is that it? Is the interview?
Yeah, Dave and I both run companies, so we do it on weekends, and we fly out to meet them, and usually done on the weekends. Sundays is usually the day, and we have this great film crew, and then it's funded just by us personally. We don't want to take advertisers, and so anyone who's listening who loves the show, please reach out to me, because we're the people. It's supported by people that like it, and frankly, David and I each write checks every year to keep it going personally, because it's become so important to us.
Fascinating. What's it like understanding kind of the whole framework of how Big Shot works? It makes a lot of sense to me that you're doing it with a partner, meaning a friend, somebody you'd enjoy hanging out with and traveling with, and so on and so forth, planning, strategizing it. But I do wonder kind of what it's like having a co-host to a podcast. There are different models, obviously, single host, co-hosts. Just maybe talk a little bit about what that's like, even in the interviews themselves.
Well, part of it is selfishly, my co-host and my co-creator of the show is one of my best friends, so it's really fun to do this together. But David and I are totally different. David will come in with the book of the guest, tabbed, highlighted, knows every single detail, and I'm more big picture. I'm like, no. Thematically, I want to understand their relationship with their children. Like in the case of Don Sofer, built Aventura, obviously his children, had inherited the businesses. I want to kind of understand that dynamic a little bit better. Or Linda Resnick, her husband is her co-founder, Stuart Resnick, who is in his own right an incredible entrepreneur. I want to understand that how that works. Or Mickey Drexler, he wasn't a founder, but I mean, he created Old Navy inside of the Gap. I want to understand the dynamics of like, how do you create, you created Old Navy inside of the Gap, working for that family. How does that work? So I think the key to it is like to have someone that, it's like a marriage in many ways, like finding someone that you have.
You're playing different roles.
Yeah, you have different roles there.
Complementary roles.
And every now and then I'm like, David, like put your notes away. Like, let's just focus on the big picture. And every now and then he's like, hey, you need to know these facts here. So it's a wonderful dynamic because we both bring different skills to the table. And it's just more fun to do with a friend.
Do you ever interview kind of people surrounding the subject concurrently, or it's always exclusively one person that you're interviewing?
Yeah, it's always one person. Although I've often said that I have one new idea that I'm sort of working on right now. In fact, if anyone's listening wants to run with it and has time, you should do it. But I have this concept that I love called My Best Friend. Literally, that's the podcast called My Best Friend. And it's you don't interview the person, you interview the person's best friend. And you basically figure out like what the real story is, because often the subject themselves, we do this, I do this, and you probably do too. We have our own, narrative that we tell ourselves. But it's our best friend who's like, well, let me tell you what really happened there. And so I think that could be, unfortunately, I'm out of time and I have to pick the things I want to work on. But I think that could be such an interesting show, because it is like the real story as opposed to the story that the subject.
I would add to what you're saying,
themselves.
Harley. Like, not to presume, but in many cases, I mean, I feel this way. I think you feel this way, that our best friends are our spouses. It would kind of just be cool to have a podcast where you interview the spouse of the person.
And only the spouse, or you could do the subject and the spouse, and basically the spouse is just like, well, that's wrong. Let me tell you the real story. Well, that's wrong, but it's really fun. And the fact that, this is a very modern 2026 thing, but the fact that I don't have to ask for permission from a network or from a streaming platform or from anyone to put the show out. I think about 10 or 20 years, 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 50 years ago, if I wanted to create Big Shot, there were gatekeepers on distribution. I would
Isn't that
have
what
to
Shopify's? I mean, we haven't talked too much
that's
about
that's
business,
right. I
but
mean, that's what
concept.
Shopify has done for retail.
Yeah.
That's what I'm able to do through things like YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Is that I don't have to ask permission to anyone to publish these things. And if people like it, I like great. But if they don't like it, I'm okay with that also. Like I'm not looking for views. I'm not trying to raise money for with ad dollars. I'm just trying to put out something that I deeply care about myself. It's very Rick Rubin's frankly too young for our show yet because but
What is
hopefully
the
one day
minimum age? I mean, is there kind of a minimum age?
75. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, we'll make exceptions. Like if you're Bobby Kotick, who sold
Was
his
Lloyd
company
Blankfein?
so I was going to say, so if you're Bobby Kotick and you sold your company for $70 billion to Microsoft, I want to hear your story. If you're Lloyd Blankfein and you ran Goldman Sachs for 20 years, and Goldman Sachs once fired you, once didn't hire you, and then I want to know your story. So we'll make Bobby Brown. We'll make exceptions for people that are exceptional.
That's the general gestalt. That's
above 75. That's where they tell us the real story of how this all happened. Yeah.
Fascinating. I'd love to talk a little bit about today. We're sitting here having this conversation at the nexus of what's called in Hebrew Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Remembrance Commemorative Day, and tonight, probably already happening now in Israel, almost, they're transitioning to Israel Independence Day. It's a somber day, a painful day in Israel in particular, but of course across for world Jewry, diaspora Jewry as well. And then you have this contrast of like night to light, or darkness to light, in the sense that the two days are juxtaposed, and we celebrate, of course, the miracle of the state of Israel, the power, the model that Israel is and become. I'd love to hear a little bit. I don't know so much about this from your perspective yet. I haven't researched it. I just would love to hear your kind of connection to Israel. I don't know how frequently you have visited, have been there, have not been there, and just what your thoughts are today in particular. I'm asking like a multi-pack question in terms of all that we've been through as a people in recent years. You've obviously been very proactive and outspoken in that time period. How you feel, particularly, today and tomorrow on these crucial days.
So, my connection to Israel is far more symbolic than it is actual. Meaning, I mean, I've been to Israel a number of times in my life, and I got a chance to go first time on Birthright, and I've got a chance to go back a number of times. And to me, my personal connection to it is this is a place that was created in a reaction to what my family went through in the Holocaust. This was a safe haven. Fundamentally, at its core, that's what it is. I know it's a place of worship, and I understand the culture of it and all as well, but and all that comes along with it. But ultimately, it is a safe haven. It is unfortunate that we need a safe haven, that we need a place where every Jew around the world can immigrate to, just simply by virtue of them being Jewish, that can feel safe. Actually, funny enough, I find right now probably the safest place for Jews might not even be Israel. Actually, might be Miami. I think Miami has
no joke.
No joke. I mean, it is remarkable. We spend time there, a lot of time in Miami. We live. I grew up in South Florida, so we go there a lot, and I think that is the place as a Jew, I feel the safest. Mostly because the volume of Jews there is remarkable, and frankly, I think as the state, the community, the city, just everything makes you feel okay about being Jewish.
And they have great restaurants also.
And they, I mean, I'm not religious, but some of the things are like, I was in Surfside a couple Fridays ago walking around with my wife, and the fact that they figured out how to open restaurants on Shabbat.
Yeah, that's cool.
I mean, they're innovating on Shabbat. Like they have figured out a way for observant Jews to have dinner on a Friday night at a really great restaurant and observe all the rules and all the laws of the Shabbat and Shomer Shabbat. But Israel to me is a symbol. It's a symbol of our right to exist in the world. We shouldn't need that. But right now, I think we've all become more Zionistic And it has less to do about the place itself and more about to do what it stands for us. It is our safe haven. And I was born in the early 80s. I'm a older millennial. I'm 42. I was born in 83.
No, you're a young guy. Okay, I'm much older.
Well, I'm an older millennial. Sorry,
Okay,
in terms
good.
of millennials, I think I'm one of the oldest millennials by age. So
If
I
you
went
had a
through.
beard, you wouldn't have gray like mine.
That's
That's
true. I
right.
don't know. I went through my entire life hearing about anti-Semitism, hearing why Israel was important, celebrating Yom Ha'atzmaut, going on birthrights. I went to Jewish summer camp and I went to Jewish elementary school, and we, Magen David Adom, and we planted trees every year. And like Israel was this thing I was related to, but never really understood. And that all changed after October 7th. It's now sort of common to say this, but I do believe in this idea of like October 8th Jews. I don't think that people that were not Jews October 7th became October 8th. I do believe October 8th simply just turned up the volume for all of us because it was a reminder of how all those stories you heard from your grandparents, all those warnings you heard from your crazy great aunt about be careful wearing a yarmulke when you're walking down this, and you're like, what are you talking about? Like, I live in Boca Raton. I live in Montreal. I'm in Toronto now. I'm in New York City. What are you talking about? This doesn't like that is your own baggage. I now understand that baggage. I now understand the importance of protecting this thing we have, the Jewish homeland. And I think that um, it is as fragile as it's ever been, and therefore it requires full, unequivocal support. Now, that being said, I think you should be allowed to criticize politics in Israel. I don't think you have to agree on everything the government is doing. I think you should be able to say this shouldn't be done this way, um, without feeling like you have to be an absolutist. But I think for the first time in my entire life, the last couple of years, I began to understand why the protection of the Jewish state of Israel is paramount.
I want to share with you something on this point. I once heard this many years ago. I don't remember where I heard it from, but I thought it was very profound. You might like it as well. The greatest distance in life is from, if you watch, it's from here to here. I mean, the greatest distance is from the head to the heart, meaning that we have many constructs or ideas in our minds, but they don't always sink into the heart where they really deeply resonate and feel them. And what you were just describing to me, what I heard you saying, was that there was kind of like this latent cognition or the stories we heard, the experiences and the exposures of the previous generations. We knew it. We trust them. We know their realities to be true, but we didn't really experience it. We didn't really feel it
Yeah.
because I grew up in New York. I'm in my early 50s, very comfortable, always never experienced anti-Semitism. And all of a sudden the earth shifted beneath us, and that which was here kind of finally landed kind of in the heart, and it activated many Jews, like you said, are always Jews and always uh, had it in them, but it kind of like they say in Hebrew, like the asimon dropped, like it used to be in the old payphones in Israel. They had these coins, and you'd hear the click.
Yeah.
So it clicked. It clicked. Something really clicked. That's what I heard.
And it is unbelievable that happened in my life. I thought we were sort of past that. We have not. I will tell you something that has affected me more than anything else, which is that there's been a couple times. I actually wrote an op-ed about this January 1st, the first day of the new year, in the National Post, which got a lot of attention and sort of went viral. And it was about my experiences as a Canadian Jew, like my lived experiences. And I told two stories. The first one I've already mentioned, which is that standing on stage, opening the Finkelstein Jewish Center, which had nothing to do with Israel, zero to do with Israel. It was about my family. It was about this rabbi, Chaim Bayarsky, who was kind to me when he didn't have to be. It was about the community, the Jewish community in Ottawa, saying thank you. It was about the fact that a G7 capital did not have a synagogue downtown, or a Jewish presence downtown. Like, that is the capital of the country of Canada, a G7 country. There was all these things it was about. What it was not about was Israel. It had nothing to do with Israel. And yet I had protests interrupting this speech that I had thought about for 20 years giving in front of my children and in front of my grandparents. And the other time it happened was we never do Big Shot. Big Shot is done live, but it's done, in a there's no audience. It's me and David and the guests in our film crew.
Would you ever do a live event? Did you ever think
So we
about
did.
that?
We did one event,
Nice.
and it was in Montreal. It was for a incredible woman named Heather Reisman, who's the founder of Indigo Books, which is like the chapters or borders of Canada. Her husband is Jerry Schwartz, Onyx, probably one of the greatest entrepreneurs on the planet, Jewish entrepreneurs on the planet. They're a power couple. She is incredible. She's a self-made billionaire. She's awesome. And David and I were interviewing her on stage. Again, Big Shot, celebration of Jewish entrepreneurship in Montreal. We did it at a conference called Startup Festival, which is this massive entrepreneurship startup festival here in Montreal, in the Old Port, in a beautiful location. And we had people rushing the stage, yelling horrible things at Heather, at me and David. It was just, and those two incidents again had nothing to do with Israel, and yet the things that were being yelled at us, like these beautiful moments, were disturbed simply because we were Jewish. Now, it was under the guise of some sort of advocacy, right? That, like, when you ask these protesters, they all gave interviews afterwards why they did that. It was all about advocacy. They were advocating for people that couldn't help themselves. They were advocating for these, against the Israeli government. They all had their reasons for it, but it was bullshit. It was advocacy. It was hatred and anti-Semitism disguised as some version of advocacy.
Right.
And those two things happened to me personally in the last 12 months.
Right. I
could not have expected that 5 years ago. That was not on my bingo card of things that were going to happen in my life. And it's activated me in a way that I don't think I've been activated before. It's created, if you thought I was ambitious before about building Big Shot, like, I don't know if I can swear on this show, but like, let's fucking go.
Yeah,
because now I want Big Shot. Now I want Big Shot to be as big as possible, and I want as many people to listen to it, and I want to celebrate as many Jewish entrepreneurs as I can. My vehicle for fixing this, I don't have a lot of, I'm not a politician. I don't write legislation. I'm not an author. I don't write books. I am an entrepreneur, but I have this new tool that I've been architecting and developing called Big Shot, and now I'm going to use my tool thing that I've built to be as loud and as proud about being Jewish as ever. And so if you are one of those protesters that disturbed either of those events, that threw horrible words at me and my family, and somehow you've heard this, all I can say is all you've done is activate me even further, because now I really, really want to make this big.
Do you, as you were talking, and particularly you mentioned how the Chabad rabbi was kind to you when he didn't need to be. It jogged in my memory. I've heard you on a few podcasts over the years. I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, that I'm remembering now vaguely something about how he had to chase you and you were not so receptive initially to his outreach. Am I remembering that properly or not really?
Chabad rabbis are, I think,
they could be aggressive, but I'm saying
I actually think they're the most wonderful. I am so pro, like, I'm so Chabad pilled. I think these people are so entrepreneurial, so caring. I'm sure there are others that maybe, like, I haven't met anyone that I'm sure there's some exceptions.
Tucker Carlson attacked Chabad recently, so Dan Senor and many
that's an amazing thing, because Tucker Carlson blamed Chabad for a whole bunch of horrible things, and I just went on X and went on Instagram and said, Lindsay and I are going to donate to every single Chabad house on campus because of this.
It's the same thing. Their negativity is just triggering more.
Same thing. There are 19 Chabad on campuses, from British Columbia to like Prince Edward Island, like all across Canada.
Thank you letters to Tucker.
That's right. And so I said, Lindsay and I are going to donate to everyone. I've had dozens of people jump on this and say, we're in also. Entrepreneurs from all over the world said, we're going to match whatever you're doing. So this horrible thing that Tucker said about Chabad turned into the greatest fundraising campaign in Chabad history. And it was this amazing thing. That is where, like, by the way, that is so symbolic, that epitomizes what we are as Jews.
Right.
Give us, throw at us your worst, and we will turn it around and make it positive. But back to the Chabad thing. No, actually, like, I never really ran away from Chabad. Sometimes I find they could be overly aggressive, but I love I love their hustle. I love their ambition.
It's entrepreneurial. That's any good.
And it's entrepreneurial. And not just that, what Chaim Bayarsky, this rabbi in Ottawa who married me, is an amazing man, will tell you is he used to come in the middle of to law school and he'd want to wrap tefillin, and I'd say sure, and he'd say, let's go in a room. I said, no, we're going to wrap tefillin in the middle of the entire law school.
Okay.
And then I don't know if do you know this guy Yossi who goes around the world wraps tefillin?
I see him on social. Yeah.
So Yossi, I guess, heard the story or knew about the story. And so in my world, in retail,
he made a career out of it.
He made a career out of it. But in my world, the biggest conference of the year is NRF, National Retail Federation. It's at the Javits Center. It's every January. There are 40,000 people that are there. It is the retail conference on the planet.
Wow.
And a couple years ago, Yossi showed up. And he's messaged me, he says, hey, I know you're here. I'd love to wrap tefillin with you. And I was like, great. So he comes in, and literally in the middle of the Javits Center, in front of 40,000 people, we wrapped tefillin. Guess what happened? Another Jew came over, and then another Jew came over, and then all these people came over. And Yossi has now come back, I think, every year to NRF to wrap tefillin with me. In fact, this year, we did it in the middle of the Shopify booth. And all these Shopify merchants and partners who were Jewish were wrapping tefillin, and those who weren't Jewish were there, like, asking questions. This is who we are, David. Like, we are...
Activation. It's activation.
We are, entrepreneurship doesn't really describe it, but we have something in us whereby we are survivors. And that is multi-generational. And that hopefully is something that's what I want for my children. Forget their inheritance and forget the things they're going to have or not have. What I want my children to inherit is that grit. I want them to inherit that instinct of survival. And I know what comes along with it is also some anxiety, and I can't sit still. My mother would say I'm sitting on shpilkas, whatever the hell that means.
Right.
But I want my children to inherit that sense of community and purpose, because that is how we've survived, and that is how we will continue to survive.
Okay. As we wind down, because we only have a few minutes left, I want to ask you two quick questions about entrepreneurship,
sure,
in particular, and then we'll have one or two quick personal reflections,
sure,
and we'll be done. It was just announced yesterday that Tim Cook is going to be stepping down as CEO of Apple. Obviously, Tim Cook succeeded the incredible, the indomitable Steve Jobs. I would just love to hear some of your reflections a little bit on that announcement. In the Apple context in particular.
Look, I think we are living in the era of founder leaders. Brian from Airbnb had this great line
Brian Chesky.
Brian Chesky, had this great line maybe a year or two ago where he said it's time for founder mode. And I love this idea that obviously Steve Jobs wasn't able to see, he obviously passed away, and I think he found the closest thing he could find to a quasi-founder in Tim Cook. Tim kind of operated like that. And you see like Satya Nadella also at Microsoft. He obviously wasn't the founder of Microsoft, but he operates like a quasi-founder. I think we are living in an era right now, unlike
you like that also? Because like Toby was the founder?
That's right. Yeah. I was the first customer. And then I joined Toby very, very early on and been with Toby now for 20 years building the company. But companies like Shopify, historically, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years ago, at some point we would have got tapped on the shoulder and by the board or some investor and said, hey, kids, it's time to let the adults in the room and let them take over. That is not the case anymore. Now founders are leading their companies from inception all to full scale. And I don't think there's anyone on the planet that cares more about the business than the founder. So I think Steve Jobs, those are massive shoes to fill. I think Tim Cook did an amazing job. We have a great partnership with Apple. They're an amazing company. I think their new CEO, who's also I think homegrown as well, is probably the right pick as opposed to an outsider. But I think we are living right now in this era of founder mode, and I think it is leading to companies that just like you can tell when it's a founder leading the company, even if you don't know them. Like you can see from the product, you can see Steve Jobs famously cared about the chips inside the computer and how they were designed. They were all like, I don't know if you know this, but all the chips inside the original Macs, if you broke open the hardware and looked inside of the computer, which no one saw, you would see all the wiring was perfectly, beautifully designed and architected. Steve would talk about the back of the bookcase and no one saw, but he cared deeply about it. I think you're seeing a lot more attention to detail and a lot more, high give a shit quotient from these founder-led companies, and big shoes to fill, but I mean, Tim did an incredible job.
Cool. Let's talk just to drop quickly about AI. We could probably have a
Yeah,
whole podcast on AI,
sure.
but I'd just love to hear some thoughts, just what you're seeing today in terms of AI in business, AI in life. I'm kind of torn. Like, we're in the journalistic space. We get a lot of submissions that are clearly impacted by AI. Good, bad. I don't know myself, to be honest, at times.
I think this generation now has probably the greatest opportunity to build something in history. I think both the barrier to entry into I'm taking an entrepreneurial lens here, but I think both the barrier to entry and the time to scale have completely collapsed. I know there are companies on Shopify. There's a company called Grunes, for example, that was built 2 years ago on Shopify. It's a supplement company. They just got sold to Unilever for $1 billion. Gymshark, Allo, Viore, On Running. These businesses didn't exist 10 years ago, and now they're the dominant in their verticals. We've never seen. So again, it's never been more affordable to start, and I think time to scale has collapsed because of it as well. But I think ultimately what AI is delivering for entrepreneurs is like this uncapped reach and uncapped resources. Like there was a sound barrier, the proverbial metaphorical sound barrier to entrepreneurship, which is like you can only grow so big, and eventually you have to like go, raise a ton of money or go hire a massive team. There are teams now that are 3 people, strong, that are doing $1 billion in annual revenue. I think also from the job market perspective, AI certainly does shake up the job market. But I think the reputation of entrepreneurship as a gamble, quote unquote, will be reframed. I think a lot more people will say, look, I want to try my hand at this, with a thing that I love between 13 years old and 16 years old. I want to try my hand at doing this. And, back to my grandfather where we started the conversation, if his egg stall would have failed, he would have had to sell his house, or at least, they not put food on the table. The barrier to entry and the cost of failure were so high, that's all been taken down. So I think the skill set of all the best entrepreneurs I know is what AI cannot replace. Things like taste and judgment and discernment and ambition, like that's a human thing. But I think now is really the time to take advantage of that. So this very well may be, this next era of entrepreneurship may very well be the golden age of entrepreneurship. And I think it's going to be human ambition married with like just the greatest superpower technologies ever. And I think I think anyone who's listening needs to be a techno optimist right now. What that means is you're going to use one of these agentic applications, you're going to use one of these large language models, and you're going to see something that doesn't look right, or you're going to see some sort of hallucination. You're going to be like, this is terrible. I can't believe it. And then a week later, that mistake will be fixed. Or a day later, that mistake will be fixed. Or you're going to give it a project to do for you, and it's going to come out, and it's not going to be great. If you try it again 24 hours later, it may be exceptional. That is the pace of change right now. And like, it's, you have to be a techno optimist, and you have to believe in the fact that like, this is going to be, Steve Jobs, back to him for a second, talked about the computer being a bicycle for the mind.
Uh-huh.
And I think if the computer is a bicycle for the mind, then like AI it's like an F1 car for the mind. Like this is unbelievable we can do here. So I'm incredibly optimistic about what all these will do.
You're super pumped about it.
I don't know how you cannot be.
You'd be surprised, but I mean,
I know,
a lot of people,
and that's why I'm saying I know a lot of the technology doomers out there, or people that are worried. I think anytime there's big change, there's always going to be concern. But I think you have to be a techno optimist. I think all of you listening need to play with these tools and tinker and toil and build something cool and go try something. A friend of mine was looking at a house on my street and he wasn't sure. And I literally just went into my Claude and I said, hey, here's the house from Google Maps. My friend's really into more modernist design, some Scandinavian design, a little bit Japanese design. Give me 5 mock-ups of what the house could look like. And I sent him a deck with this 5 mock-ups and he's he's like, I can't believe this. He's like, this is exactly what I want. Anyways, hopefully it leads him building the house. But that would have taken 3 weeks and $30,000 from an architect just to get some inspiration of what's happening here. And the same way that, Big Shot couldn't have existed 10 years ago because the technology wasn't there. And now anyone listening, if there's a story you want to tell, if there's a project you want to embark on, there are no more gatekeepers. We all can do this. So I don't know. It's an exciting time right now.
I love it. Okay, last question. I always ask my guests, this is my final question. I always ask them to share something about themselves that most people in the world would not necessarily guess about them. Like something that is not so well known about yourself that you're comfortable sharing, obviously.
I've had anxiety my entire life. I still have anxiety. I still wake up every single morning anxious. And I've been able to tune that with things like meditation and exercise. And frankly, a cold plunge has been one of the greatest new things in my life. I take a cold plunge every morning.
You live about you, for God's sake. But okay.
I know. Well, I still have a cold plunge in the gym, and I don't think that goes away. And as I get older, what I realize is it's not going to go away. That's deep in me. And so for those of you that have something, whether it's your own anxiety or it's some form of depression or it's, I think it's easy to look at people that have had any success whatsoever and think that they've had it all figured out. I do not have it figured out. I'm still anxious about a lot of things, including, my own business and my own entrepreneurial ventures. I think you embrace these things. I think we often as entrepreneurs tell all the highlight reels and forget about the blooper reels. But the best, and you hear this in the Big Shot podcast also, the people that you talk to and you ask them again, when do you know that you made it? The fact that David Rubenstein still doesn't know he made it yet, or, Charles Bronfman is still trying to, prove to his dad that he's a great entrepreneur in his own right. It humanizes these people. It makes us all feel a little bit more connected.
I think Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant in their book, Option B, I think they have a phraseology I read a long time. I think it's embrace the suck. I think that's what they call it.
I love that.
I think that's
well, that's why every morning I get into the cold plunge and I say this is going to suck, and I still get in it anyway.
Okay, Harley, thank you so much. This was terrific.
David, thank you.